Hey, what's up guys? John from Mongo Fishing. Today I'm here on the MONSTERBASS channel to talk to you guys about the LUNKERHUNT 5-inch Lunker Stick. It came in the January 2022 MONSTERBASS LUNKERHUNT Takeover box. So let's get into it. Alright guys, so like I said, my name is John from Mongo Fishing and this is the MONSTERBASS channel. Now if you're new to the bass fishing community, you want to learn some tips, techniques and tricks and how to become a better bass angler, make sure you hit the subscribe button right down there below, along with the bell notification button so you get notified every single time MONSTERBASS puts out another video. My channel, Mongo Fishing, will be linked in the description below. Also, I'd dig it if you came over and checked me out. My channel is mostly tournament footage though. It's not much for tips and techniques. I might get into like decision-making process and stuff like that. But basic tips and techniques, I rarely put those out on my channel. I do occasionally. So, I mean, my channel isn't for everybody. I get that. Regardless, I'd still dig it if you came over and checked me out. But let's get into these things, man, because these LUNKERHUNT Lunker Sticks are killer baits, highly effective. And if you don't know how to use them, man, you're missing out. You got to get on this. All right, so the LUNKERHUNT Lunker Stick is LUNKERHUNT's version of the stickworm. You know, the biggest stickworm out there is the Yamamoto Senko. That thing was designed by Gary Yamamoto himself. According to him, he was using like the inside of a pen as a mold. Started making these things in the late 90s. I want to say it was 96. Started selling them. Nobody really bought onto them because they don't look like they do anything. But these things are killer because they don't do much, but they do still do stuff. Enough. It's such a subtle movement that driving bass crazy, and these things quickly earned their mark in the bass fishing community. So these things have won millions of dollars. Stick baits as a whole have won millions of dollars in bass fishing. Jordan Lee won the 2018 Bassmaster Classic on Lake Hartwell, solidified his win by throwing stickworms. I mean, he used, you know, several different techniques. You don't just win the Classic using one technique, but throughout his tournament, like, it was locked down by a stickworm. Ended up winning $300,000 and a world championship on Lake Hartwell in 2018. In fact, Lake Hartwell is where the 2022 Bassmaster Classic is going to be held in March. But regardless, these things just flat work. Great baits to use. I prefer to use them like, I don't know, like pre-spawn. When the water starts warming up and the bass really start moving in shallow to do that whole spawn business. Pre-spawn through, I don't know, like near the end of the fall transitions, pretty much when I stop throwing these. Pre-spawn, you want to use bright, obnoxious colors. This is sherbet, you know, colors like this, or like a chartreuse, or a white, or bubblegum, methylate, stuff like that, right? You want something that's really bright and obnoxious and really sticks out. You can use them bed fishing. You can use them, you can kind of like walk them through some of the grass, swimming a worm. Killer pre-spawn technique. Now, after the spawn happens, I start breaking these things down into two different colors. And that's natural colors. This is squash, came off my boat. And this is, what do they call this one? June bug. Looks closer to like a red shad. But the way I look at it is I look green pumpkins, stuff like that, or squash in this case. I like to use that in like clean water. Stained water maybe, but not really dirty water. I'm not a big fan of using natural colors in dirty water. I like to use darker colors in dirty water because natural colors in clean water, you're wanting the fish to see the bait. Dark colors in darker water, you're wanting the fish to see the silhouette, basically, right? So just keep that in mind. Natural and clean, and then dark and dirty. All right, rigging. I'll go through wacky rig, which is probably my favorite way to fish it. And then we'll get into Texas rig, and then weighted Texas rig, and then with a tail spinner. So let's get into the rigging portion. Okay, so for wacky rig, got your little worm here. You see it's got a flat side, and it's got a pointed side. I like to rig, typically when I'm Texas rigging, I like to go on the flat side and have this as a tail. Right here in the middle, near the middle, there's what they call the egg sac. Okay, if you have an O-ring tool like this, you slide your worm as far down in there as you want. Let's backtrack. we need to find the center of balance. And so typically the center of balance is going to be somewhere near the back side of the O-ring most of the time, okay? So if you don't have an O-ring tool and you just want to wacky rig it, all you do is you take your hook. This is a number 2, not a 2/0, but a number 2. And you put it near the back side of your little egg sac that's sitting right here, okay, with the back side. So when you cast this thing, if it sinks one side down faster than the other, then you just got to adjust your hook, move it back, move it forward, move it whatever, so this thing sinks nice and flat, basically. You want it flexing as it falls, okay? You don't want it going down one side faster than the other when it's wacky rigged. Now, I mentioned an O-ring. O-ring tool, what that does, a little tool like this, you slide your worm and slide the O-ring tool, and then slide an O-ring, a black rubber O-ring. Man, I don't know why this is so hard for me to do right now. Because I'm grabbing more than one. Slide it down. Over top, right there. Now you can adjust it, same thing, figure out where the center of balance is. Adjust this thing forward or backward. And then take your hook, run it underneath the O-ring and underneath into the hook itself, or into the bait itself. Now what this does is when a fish grabs this and he pulls it, if he rips the worm off, you're still stuck on your O-ring if you have a properly sized O-ring. There are multiple size O-rings. That's why I was having difficult with this one. This is a little small for this O-ring tool. I have multiple O-ring tools. I just happened to grab one off the boat. But anyway, so keep that in mind. If you have a properly sized O-ring like this one is, then if this hook tears, the bait should stay on the O-ring pretty easily. Okay, so that's wacky rig. If you need to sink faster, use a weighted wacky rig. They actually have a technique for that. It's called slim shaking, but that has a slightly different design worm, but typically it's just a weighted, like a jig head for wacky rigging. Okay, so that's that. Now, Texas rigging. I'm gonna pull that back out and I'm gonna rig up a Texas rig the same way, both styles, regular Texas rig, but I'm gonna do it with a 3/0 EWG and a 3/0 round bend worm hook. So they're both the same size hook. They're both katana hooks. And so you'll be able to see a difference between the 3/0 EWG and the 3/0 round bend worm hook. All right, so we'll start with the 3/0 round bend worm hook. Looks like that. All you do is you insert the hook in the dead center of your nose there. Come down about a 1/4 inch or so, pop it out, slide your hook up, or slide your worm up around to the, up near the eyelet. Measure out like that, where your hook would be popping out. Bend it, run it right through the center, and then Texpose it, tuck it back in, and there you go. A Texas rigged worm hook. This is on, yeah, the regular round bend worm hook. Now I'm gonna set this down and rig another one on an EWG, same exact style, so you guys can see the difference in how they look. Now this one's missing the tail, and I'll show you that in a minute why, but it's not gonna change what you're gonna see here. Still gonna run it through the same exact way. Measure it out. To expose it. There we go. Now, I'll put these two side by side up here at their noses, and you'll see, oops, that one slid down. Might have run that a little too far up. Anyway, you'll see that one hook is longer than the other, even though these are both 3/0. One's an EWG, one's a round bend worm. So keep that in mind when you're worm fishing. If you want a little longer hook, you might want to go with the round bend worm hook. If you want a wider gap, go with the EWG. But if you still need a long, wide gap, then you might need to go with a 4/0, 5/0, etc., just to get that bigger hook. You can also adjust your hook size to adjust your sink rate. So keep that in mind. Now, another thing you can do for your sink rate is we're going to take this off of here. And take a weighted swim bait hook. Weighted swim bait hook. We're going to take it where the hook came out. When we ran it down about a 1/4 inch, we're going to hook it up, go the opposite way. And then same thing, measure it, find your bend. Bam. To expose it. Now you have a weighted worm hook, basically. It's a swim bait hook. This thing will allow it to sink a little bit faster. I mean, you can adjust your sink rate anyway with the regular worm hook just by adjusting, you know, a piece of tungsten or whatever on the nose. But this allows you to keep it nice and compact. If you don't want to have to use a peg, or maybe you don't have any pegs, this is another option you can do right there. Now, another technique, and this is why this has the end bit off, is there's always tail spinners in my boat. What I mean by a tail spinner is this is a Colorado or willow blade, your choice. So this Colorado blade with a little bit of a split ring right there, and then a really small swivel, and then a screw lock. See that? And then all you do is you screw this in to the tail of your worm, or where the tail was. That's why I bit that piece off prior to filming, is so that I can just screw this right in, and there we go. So now we have a little bit of flash and a little bit of thump to go along with our Senko. Sorry, to go along with our stick bait. So super simple, super easy to use. Cast it out, let it sink. Docks, laydowns, grass. I mean, pretty much anywhere you want. Now, how to fish this? Super simple. Doesn't matter if it's rigged like this or wacky rigged or whatever. It's one of the easiest techniques in the world, man. Cast it out, leave your line slack, let it sink about 5 seconds. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000, 5 1,000, right? What you're doing is you're watching your line. You want to see if it ticks or if it starts, you know, swimming away or whatever. But what you're doing is paying attention to your line. You're looking for a bite. Obviously, if it starts swimming away or if you feel a bite, swing on it. But that's what you're doing. After 5 seconds, nothing's happened, pop it a time or two. Start letting it sink back down 5 more seconds. So it's wacky rigged. As it's falling, it's shimmying, right? It's kind of, I mean, we're talking like super subtle movements. Like, it's not flexing like this. It is just ever so slight shimmies back and forth or up and down, depending on how it's rigged. And again, when you pop it, it'll flex and it'll start slowly shimmying back down. Really hard to notice unless you're actually really paying attention to it. But that's why these things are so effective. It's because the movement is so subtle that it just drives bass crazy. They have to eat it. Rod, reel, line. If you are a spin cast person, if you're throwing spinning rods, spinning reels, reel size, you want about a 2500 size. Line, you want like 8 to 12, depending on whatever it says on the side of your spool on your spinning reel. Pay attention to that. That actually helps keep down on the backlashes and stuff like that. Or a little bird's nest, whatever you want to call it on the spinning reel. But that helps cut back if you match your line with your reel. And then for the rod, like, man, I'm a proponent. I'm 6'6", so like I am a huge fan of 7 foot and above for almost every technique I do. So that's what I'm gonna tell you to do. But something that fits you. Me, it's gonna be a 7 foot medium, maybe a medium heavy, fast action regardless. So that's that. Bait casters, same thing. You want 8 to 12 pound fluoro, not mono. 7 foot, medium to medium heavy, fast action again. Reel speed, you know, I'm a big fan of like 7 to 1 gear ratio and higher. When a fish bites, I want to be able to get them out of the cover as quick as possible, whatever that cover may be. Even if it's just open water, I want to get them back. And again, since you're kind of like, you're dead sticking this, the reel speed is irrelevant for when you're, the actual, it's like fishing part, if you will. Your reel speed really comes into play on this technique when you're trying to get them back. But that's that, guys. Again, super simple technique, man. These things are so effective. I fish fast. In almost all my tournaments, I'm just burning down the bank. And so this isn't conducive with the way I fish most of the time. Now, with that said, I will still have a bunch of packs of stickworms in the boat with me, because if the bite gets slow, I'm going to stop and slow down to this stuff. Or if I come across an area that I really got to pick apart, I'm going to come start picking apart with a stickworm, because these things are so effective. Guys, if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the thumbs up. Drop a comment below. Myself or one of the other Monster Bass members will gladly answer any questions. Again, my channel, Mongo Fishing, me linked in the description below. I'd dig it if you came over and checked me out. As always, guys, get out of the water, be safe, and go catch a monster bass.